Hello and welcome back to the Dragon and Bear Show. So, if you caught my little post about the podcast audio being fucked up, it wasn't the only video I got fucked. I recorded this video I'm doing now a few days before, and yeah, it's clearly just me speaking to Alex, but no response back because you can't hear his audio. So it's a case of re-recording, sadly without him present. So I'm gonna have to try and remember what I said, which isn't going to happen, so I'm just going to go off brand new material. So yeah, obviously we're doing the tier listing for the DC animated movies that we've been covering for the past year, and this is my tier list. So I'm going to just quickly jump onto that and get cracking. Right, so what I need here is my actual tier list up, because obviously, as I say, this has been done, so I know exactly the order. So last time when we did it, I basically was kind of just let's change this real quick. I can actually, there we go. I can actually keep an eye on OBS. Yes, obviously I put it in just any order, and then at the end I put it in actual order, because that was Alex's idea, and yet he screwed me. As you'll see on his, he screws me by just ignoring that concept. So I'm just going to ignore that concept as well. So I'm just going to jump straight in on put it in actual order. So obviously first up, obviously we covered the Flashpoint Paradox movie, the movie that kicked all of this off, and yeah, it was a great movie. It's easily my favorite entry in this franchise, and I'm interested to see how they adapt it within the new Flash movie. So it's not going to be the same, but I'm interested to see how they work it, since obviously they got rid of the Thomas Wayne Batman and got rid of the Michael Keaton Batman. So we'll see how they handle that. But in terms of this, it was a great movie. Animation was pretty different to the rest of them, but it worked better than a certain later movie that changed animation, and it was violent, very violent. So for that, it goes in the S tier, and it's going to stay at that number one spot. So next up, obviously, it was Justice League War, which is the first proper entry with your brand new voice cast, even if technically most of this cast never made it past this movie, since they all got recast apart from Batman. I remember who didn't get recast. Batman, I think Green Lantern, Flash, Shazam, and Cyborg. So your main ones didn't. The only one, obviously, Superman, Wonder Woman. I think that was all. Yeah, just Superman and Wonder Woman both ended up getting recast following this. So they started with two different complete actors, and then the rest of the franchise was people new. But you know, for what they did in this one, they were pretty good, and it's a really good first Justice League entry that actually focused heavily on the league, since Flashpoint, even though it says Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox, it's a makeshift Justice League, whereas this is your actual Justice League dealing with their biggest threat really out the gate, which is Darkseid. He's the biggest threat overall, and he's the overall arcing villain of this franchise. And for him, like, instant to get him in their first proper entry, that's a really bold move, and they handled it really well. A lot of really good fights in it, and it's a really solid cast. So I'm going to put this in the A tier. Obviously, it will be moved once more start being added. So next up is Son of Batman, the first Batman solo entry in the franchise. First of many Batman solo entries, because, you know, apart from the ones with the title on Justice League in front of it, Batman was the one that, you know, this franchise loved the most. I mean, you got Son of Batman, you got Batman vs Robin, you got Batman Bad Blood. Batman's heavily involved in Justice League Dark. He's heavily involved in the Justice League vs Teen Titans movie. He's involved in the death of Superman. He's involved in the reign of Superman. He's in Batman Hush. Obviously, he's in the all of the Justice League entries. So one, two. I'm giving up counting, but either way, he's literally the one this franchise loves the most, which is fair enough because it's Batman. Even if some entries you could probably think, okay, i.e. the Justice League Dark, you probably go, okay, we could just take him out and just utilize anyone else. But, you know, this franchise needs a front face, and that front face is Batman. But for Son of Batman, I wasn't the biggest of fans. I enjoyed it. It's obviously the first of the two Deathstroke entries in the franchise, but it wasn't as good as the two previous movies, in my opinion. It was dropping down, but it's not as bad as how I prefer. I think some of the There's one Batman entry that I would put lower than this, but for me, Son of Batman goes in B for Batman. Okay, so next up we have Justice League: The Throne of Atlantis, the follow-up to Justice League War, that introduces Aquaman into the franchise. And again, I had a blast with this one. I really enjoyed it. I like the character of Aquaman. The fact that, just like the movies, they're not basically making him a really shit character. They're actually making him a character you want to like. Obviously, it introduces Atlantis. It introduces Aquaman's brother, Black Manta, also gets introduced. There's a lot of really cool underwater sequences. There's a lot of horror within that, which is, again, why it's really sad that they cancelled that Trench movie. That would have been really cool. But as a follow-up to Justice League War, okay, it tones it down in terms of how big the threat is. Yeah, it's a city-destroying threat because the Atlanteans have invaded the city. But obviously, you can't really just constantly have a world-ending threat. So obviously, they've gone from Darkseid to obviously Orm, and it's not a bad drop back. Again, I'm pretty certain. Yes, there was, because at the end of Justice League War, was an end credit scene introducing this character, and if I remember correctly, he does speak. But again, they recast him for this movie with Sam Witwer, who is a great actor and he does a really good job at bringing this character to life. But yeah, it's again another visual treat, and I'm going to slap that in front of Justice League War. Oh, hold on, there we go. So yeah, for me, I just about prefer it over War. Yes, I like the fact that War at the gate goes to Darkseid, but like it's my boy Aquaman. They do a really good job at bringing him to life, having him as basically a straight up drunk early on, and then eventually him just going with this. And of course, at the end, they named the name Aquaman. It's like, I hate it. And of course, Green Lantern's like, I fucking hate this guy. So yeah, he name's Aquaman. So yeah, so that goes in the A slot. Okay, so next is Batman vs. Robin. So this is the one I mentioned that I like the least out of all the Batman entries. I think it just mishandles the Court of Owls. It kind of slots in weird because the first one focused heavily on the League and obviously their downfall to Deathstroke and him sort of becoming the new sort of head villain of like an army of ninjas and stuff. But I feel like this slots in weirdly, especially if you obviously think about the next entry after this is Batman Bad Blood, which goes back to the League storyline. This kind of just feels misplaced. It feels like they could have done the League trilogy and kind of teased the Owl, and instead of the Hush entry, they could have done this entry there and reworked it a bit more, so it actually made it actually didn't mishandle anything. So this is one I know Alex, if I remember correctly, likes it a bit more than me. I could be wrong off the top of memory. I can't be asked to get his tier list up that I've got the image of. But for me, it's going straight into the C slot because it's an okay entry. It's just not one of my preferred ones. But talking about a bit more preferred Batman entry, obviously there's next is Batman Bad Blood, which I just mentioned, which brings back the League storyline since it focuses on Talia basically manipulating Batman, who everyone thinks is dead at one point, and they're using him as a villain. It introduces Mad Hatter, and yeah, obviously it brings in a new hero, the Batwoman, who only really pops up in the last entry for a few shots. You obviously got Batwing, who appears in this, and you get a very brief cameo from Batgirl. That again is another thing that I feel like this franchise has mishandled is that character, because she has done nothing at all in this franchise. But I like this one because it introduces more of the Bat family, because so far we've just had Damian and we've had Dick, and it's been more focused heavily on Damian, which makes sense because Son of Batman, it makes more sense than focusing on Dick, who at this point is Nightwing. But obviously this one introduces more of the Bat family and utilises them heavily in the final act to defeat the big villain. Obviously, as I say, it's Talia and her goons of League of Assassin makeshift members. So yeah, obviously that deals with that. And yeah, I think I'm going to put this in B, just above Son of Batman, because I prefer it. I do like how they handle a lot of the Bat family characters, and it's just a shame that it's an entry that feels weird because no one's really used apart from Damien and Dick after this. So that's why I won't put it any higher. if they utilize the characters going forward a bit more, I might have actually put it into the A category and obviously rework my rating. But because they don't really utilize them post this movie, I'm not really going to put it any higher. So obviously next up is the Justice League versus Teen Titans movie. This is a fun movie. Introduces your Titans, takes Damian away from Batman, and puts him in a scene where Robin's a bit more heavily used, and not just Robin. Nightwing's involved after this movie. So this one, he's not. He's just the one that obviously speaks to Starfire to help with Damian's being a knob situation. But going forward, he eventually rejoins the Titans. But yeah, it's a fun entry that pits the two teams against each other. A bunch of kids versus a bunch of really strong heroes. And shows how, even at their age, they're still really smart and can actually outwit a lot of the members of the league. So it's really good. Plus, obviously, I like the character of Gar. It's really cool to see his transformations. Raven is really fun. And the dark mystery of her. Starfire is just a badass. Blue Beetle, I can't wait to watch that movie when it comes out this year. So it was a good way of introducing a lot of characters that maybe some people weren't as knowledgeable about, unless you've obviously seen Young Justice and the old Teen Titans, and Teen Titans Go, but we don't talk about that. So unless you've seen them, you might not know a lot of these characters. It's a good way of introducing them. Plus, it kind of puts Cyborg, it gives that little cameo Cyborg within this team, even if, again, after this movie, they kind of eradicate that part of it, since this sets up him being part of the team, which, again, makes sense since the old Titans shows, he's always been a part of it. But this kind of here's a cameo, he's gone. But it's still a really fun movie, and for that, I'm going to slot it just above Throne of Atlantis if it lets me. It's not going to let me, there we go. I'm hoping that lawnmower does not come through on the mic, but we'll see. So yeah, okay, so next up is Justice League Dark, and what more can I say about this? It's fucking Constantine, Zatanna, Swamp Thing, Deadman, and yeah, okay, Batman, but Etrigan. It's the dark side of this universe. It's some of my favorite characters, and it utilizes a really decent plot of them basically having to come together because there's this darkness slowly creeping in. So Batman's having to unite a team of magical, dark-based heroes, to tackle this threat that really Justice League can't handle, which you see in the finale when they're basically beaten. So it makes sense, obviously, him going into an actual group of people. You've got magic, you've got supernatural powers, you're a fucking tree swamp monster, you're a demon. It makes sense him going to them and bringing them together. It just feels weird that they utilized Batman in this story. It could have literally just been Constantine watching the league fall and being like, okay, we need to put a team together. So it could have been someone else, but I'm guessing they just utilized him because him being the head of this franchise, it makes sense as to him be the one that helps form some teams. So for me, I mean, this movie instantly goes into the S tier. I love this movie, but I just prefer Flashpoint a bit more just because I like the story of that movie. But for bringing back Matt Ryan as Constantine, this is what puts it in the S tier. Okay, so next is the Teen Titans solo outing, which is the Judas Contract. And I don't hate this one, as I said when we reviewed it. I just don't like the fact that again, it feels like it's an entry that is misplaced. Because I remember me and Alex speaking heavily about the fact that this feels like a last entry. Like, it feels like there should be an entry between the end credit scene of the Justice League vs. Teen Titans where they introduce Terra, and then there should be an entry where you actually build up this character before her big reveal in this movie. So it does feel like a bit out of place, but it brings back the Titans, who are really great. It brings out Deathstroke, who's a great character, and is like one of my favourite villains. So for that, obviously, it gets a bit more of an oomph. There's a little cameo from Kevin Smith, which is quite a funny little cameo. That's good. It's just that Terra thing just stops it from going any higher. So I am just going to slot it just above. Again, is he going to let me? There we go. I'm going to slot it just above Bat and Bad Blood. I prefer it to those just because I love the Titans team. Plus, members of the Titans do get heavily used within the last act of this franchise, i.e. Starfire, Raven, and Robin. Nightwing's a subplot, but like Gar, Beetle, they're both gone. Unlike with the Bat family, who basically you get little cameos from Batwoman. I think you get not Batgirl and not Batwing cameos, but they're not heavily part of the plot. They're just like dealing with the incident going on. But these characters here are actually more involved in that plot, so that's why that goes into the B category, since they actually do utilize these characters a bit more going forward. Okay, so next up is the Suicide Squad Hell to Pay movie. They're just like the Titans' first entry with the Justice League. This is their first outing, but unlike those ones, this is the first outing that doesn't involve any Justice League members. It's literally just about the Suicide Squad dealing with a get a hell free card that Amanda Waller wants, so she can basically survive a cancer she's got, if I remember correctly. And it also brings back Reverse Flash or Zoom from Flashpoint and reutilizes him. So this goes back to Flashpoint and deals with your big villain of that and the big ending where obviously he gets shot. So it deals with that heavily more, which I really liked. I like they actually went back to that. It's a bit weird that it's in the Suicide Squad movie, but it's cool. Like, it doesn't need the Flash, because that shows that how weak he is, that the Suicide Squad, a team of makeshift villains that aren't like his level of power, can actually like deal with him and handle him. And it picks decent members as well for the squad. Obviously, Deadshot and Harley, well-known ones. Obviously, Bronze Tiger, who was in the Arrowverse version, so that was a good pick there. Copperhead, I think his name is, the Serpent. It's an interesting one. I haven't really seen him anywhere else, so it's an interesting pick. Obviously, Killer Frost, good pick. We know from obviously the Arrowverse, even if it is a different version of her. Trying to remember the characters in this movie. It's been a while. There's a few other cameos like Black Manta and all that, but yeah, it's a good pick of a team that isn't just like copy and paste of the either movies. It just takes the two that you have seen in both movies in a sense. Obviously, Deadshot and Harley in the first one, just Harley in the second one, and brings other characters into it. Plus, you also have a little Dr. Fate cameo, someone who we don't get to see after this, but it's not really necessary. But it's a nice little introduction if you then obviously check out the Black Adam movie where the different versions more heavily involved. So for me, the Suicide Squad movie goes straight into the A tier, sorry. Right, it's not gonna let me go. Right above the Just League Teen Titans movie. It's a much better entry, I think, a much better introduction. It's a really fun, dark movie. It's one that I recommend checking out of all the A tier ones. Okay, next up is Death of Superman. Obviously, that is the first Superman entry. That's by himself. Even if the League is heavily involved, but it's the first one with just Superman on it. And it's a really great first entry that utilizes probably one of his most famous stories, which as I say is in the title, The Death of Superman, where obviously Darkseid sends Doomsday to basically kill Superman, and it's a hard-hitting fight. Like it builds up to it nicely. As you got the League fighting Doomsday at first, and it builds up then into the Superman fighting him, and it's hard-hitting, and it ends with the iconic shot from the comic, which obviously the poster shot, which is obviously if you can see the image, it's the poster shot. It's a great entry. It's a shame the next one doesn't live up to it heavily. Like, it's follow-up entry, but for the first entry, it's honestly up there for me. So it's going just below Suicide Squad in the A category. It's going to go between Suicide Squad and Justice League versus Teen Titans, because it's a great solo entry for Superman. It's probably one of my favourite Superman adaptations out there. It's a good way of giving the actor who voices Superman in this franchise, which I can't remember his name off the top of my head. If I remember correctly, he's the guy from Stand By Me. Obviously, it gives him a chance to actually shine a bit more, because he's had obviously little moments building up, but this is his first proper entry, so it's a good way of giving him his chance to show himself. So next up is the Constantine City of Demons movie, which was a mini-series, and they adapted it into putting all the episodes into one big movie. And it, unlike all this, there's no connection really to this world, but the internet says it's part of this universe, so that's why we covered it. And it's Matt Ryan again, so we have to cover it. But obviously, I'm going to instantly put this straight into the S tier about dilly-dallying right behind the Justice League Dark entry. I do really love this entry. It's an interesting story of him trying to save his friend's, obviously, daughter from a demon that is his own making, and just to have Matt Ryan back, dealing with all this. There's some really cool scenes in this. There's this mummy demon that is really brutal. And it's set in like at first in like a slaughterhouse, and it's obviously him fighting like other demons in a church, which is really cool. And there's some really good like magical visuals in this movie, like there is with all the Constantine entries. It's just weird. I just wish they didn't make some sort of reference to the world. That's the only criticism I give it. But I do like that it does keep itself isolated. It just would be nice to have a little reference to fully cement that it is part of this universe. But we just agreed in both together, it's going to stick in this universe because it's so great. Okay, so next up is Reign of Superman. Obviously, when we recorded this, we did this one straight after Death, and then we did Constantine. So we just, instead of splitting it like the actual company did when they released them. But as I said, when talking about Death, this is nowhere near as good as the first one. Like, if you consider Batman vs Robin compared to Son of Batman, there's only a small drop off, because as I said, Son of Batman is a decent entry. It's not my favorite, but then Batman vs Robin is a drop down. For me, Reign of Superman is 2 drops down. I'm gonna put it above Batman vs Robin because I do like it a bit more. Oh, there we go. I do like it a bit more than Batman vs Robin, because obviously Superboy's in this. You got Steel in it. You got Cyborg Superman. There's a lot of really cool characters. Plus, it does bring in the dark side plot, showing that he's still heavily here. Like, you may have defeated him in the first movie, but he's still a big threat, especially since we're coming towards the end when he's finally going to enact his plan. And obviously, he's the one pulling all these strings, a lot of strings going on, sending obviously these characters to basically deal with Superman since he's dead. So obviously, we also get the black suited Superman, and we get a shot of the fortress where it's got its own version of Superman, which is cool. And it's cool seeing these characters fighting a lot. If I remember, Alex agreeing that it just felt too many characters for this one movie. There should have been like hints, a bit more in the previous movie, because all they did with that was just end credit scenes. Then they jumped into this. It just felt a bit rushed. But I did like Rainn Wilson as Lex Luthor, just like he was really great in Death. He's a really good villain in Reign. But obviously, he's like an anti-villain kind of. He's not a full villain in this franchise. He's more just like an anti-villain. But yeah, he's a really great anti-villain, which is weird for Lex Luthor. He's always fully villain, but obviously his motives are just for himself. But it's cool to see that he's trying to do some good, even if he's just thinking about himself in the process. So yeah, it's like 2 steps back from it. It's in the C category. Okay, so Batman Hush. I remember in the first day of me trying to record this video, I spoke about the fact that in the actual review, I was always worried about this movie because I was like, okay, I remember this movie being pretty iffy, but it turned out not to be. It turned out to be actually a pretty good, solid entry that I really did actually enjoy. Like, not like Death of Superman level of I really enjoyed it. It's just an entry that I actually found pretty good. Like, it's mid-tier, so I'm going to slot that into the B category above the Titan solo movie, because this was a good one that gave us a lot of the Batman classic villains, and also did a switch on the Hush storyline, which a lot of people hated, but again, I never really read the comics, so I can't really hate on it, and I didn't mind the twist. It was an interesting way to throw people off, rather than just copy and paste him. Nothing else really more to say about that. It's probably my, as well as clear by that, it's my favorite Batman entry within this franchise, because it introduces Catwoman as well, which is a big part of it. Okay, here's the one that, this is the point in the video where I changed this D to say dog shit, so I'm going to do that again because that was hilarious. Because Wonder Woman Bloodline was just a letdown. It's going straight in that dog shit category. It was a letdown that, it was like Batman Hush. I couldn't remember much about it, so I was hoping it was a Hush situation where I actually really enjoyed it, but I sadly didn't. It like some of the other ones, it just like set it away from this universe. So it's not like, i.e., Batman Hush kind of does it a bit, and obviously the Constantine solo movie, it sets it away from this universe. But the annoying thing is not that, it's just that a lot of the characters suck in this movie. There's a poor choice of villains, really, and it's like they've pushed a villain heavily, even though like she was introduced through a montage, which made no sense whatsoever. You needed like in a full half hour of showing this character snapping, basically. Like, it just made no sense whatsoever. There's a lot of bad mistakes in this movie. I don't really want to talk about it much, so I'm just going to move on to the next one, which is Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. It's the big finale act of this universe, even if we do have one technically after, that deals with Darkseid coming back to Earth and actually taking over and actually winning, splitting up the league and splitting up every team, basically, killing a lot of them, manipulating others and turning them into his minions, and forcing Superman, Raven to team up with Constantine, Etrigan, Robin to deal with this, and Lois Lane to deal with basically the Darkseid threat. And it's a good final act. It's a good way to end this universe, because it just gives you all your characters that you've seen before and you've loved before fighting in this big fight. Obviously, there is some little cameos from characters, which is pretty cool. The only thing I hated was the fact that they did the whole Green Lantern obviously Oa sequence, which would have been cooler if they actually did a Green Lantern solo entry, but they didn't. And by this point, Green Lantern is just a cameo that dies, like most of them. But it's still really, really good entry. It's really fun. It's really dark, and it's gonna go for me. According to this, it went straight into the S tier, straight behind the Justice League Flashpoint Paradox movie. It's my second favorite movie in this franchise, and it's one of my favorite films that came out in 2020. So one of the only good things that happened in 2020 was this movie being released. Okay, and finally we have the Constantine solo entry again. So the second solo entry, but this time it's post World, so it's after the ending of the last movie, the Apocalypse War. It's after that, and it's different animation style, and it's him dealing with the aftermath of what his actions. And I remember me and Alex speaking about the fact that the animation style was iffy. We would have preferred if they did like like every time the character died, it was different animation style, but they didn't do that. And but it is cool that we got Constantine back as obviously Matt Ryan voicing him, and it's also cool that we got the villain from the other solo entry as the big part of the finale of this. It's just a shame that it just feels like they could have not done this movie. It's obviously it's still okay entry. It's just they could have done better with it. And if I do anything after this, I think we said in that the actual review, if I do anything after this, then great. It makes sense. But if I don't, then it just feels like this is just a waste of time. So it's just going straight into the C category behind Batman vs. Robin. Yeah, that's my tier list. I'm just double checking on the actual previous one I did on the image, making sure I got everything right. Yes. And I want to just double check in case I want to change anything, because obviously I have the opportunity now to make some changes. Do I, don't I? No, I think I'm gonna stick with that. I was debating in one change, but I think I'm gonna stick with how it is. So yeah, that's my tier list. Obviously, you can check out these individual reviews we've done over the past year at the link for the playlist below. You can check out our previous tier lists we did for the Pokemon reviews. Again, I'll put that in the link below. And you can check out Alex's tier list on Thursday, I believe it is, which is at points drastically different to this. Like, for once, we're not in sync, which is an interesting thing to watch. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. And obviously, if you have a different opinion on how this franchise would lay out in your terms, put it in the comments below. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I shall hopefully see you next time. If you like what you've seen, don't be afraid to throw us a little like and subscribe. That's always very appreciated over here. And well, I'll see you on the next video.